Taking a moment, James ran the water over his face, wiping the last vestiges of tears out of his eyes, along with the remnants of sleep. He momentarily wondered if the water pressure had been increased since he felt the impacts of the droplets more firmly than usual. After another moment, he thought of the scar on his wrist and wondered what other marks might have vanished. He turned his attention first to his left elbow, where a scratch from a friend's sister had left a deep mark. Apparently, the scratch had never occurred because the skin was as new as his wrist. Shrugging, he looked down to his right thigh, where a bike accident at 10 had left a deep gash. That too was gone, but it was what was next to his thigh that caused the feelings of dread. He stared down at the junction of his legs. His anatomy was still there, but it had shrunk. He swallowed, trying to calm himself as he looked again. The change felt strange, but less of a shock than his face had been earlier. It didn't have the same sharp impact. He ran his hand down his stomach and noticed how different the feeling was. He stroked gently, but the usual reactions didn't occur. His body remained dormant, no longer responding as it once did. "Shit," James murmured. Shaking his head, he grabbed a bar of soap from a nearby dish and began the process of cleaning himself. His mind was elsewhere as he worked, occasionally noting a place where the touch felt different than normal. When he was done, he turned off the shower and stepped out of the tub. He quickly dried himself off with a towel, followed by squeezing the moisture from his hair over the tub. He shook the towel through his hair, leaving himself looking a bit like a wet dog. Grumbling, he reached for a comb and spent the next half hour attempting unsuccessfully to remove all of the tangles from his hair. Eventually, he gave up and traded the comb for a brush. Using that, he managed to quickly put his appearance into some semblance of order. He quickly dressed in sweats before taking a deep breath and opening the bathroom door. "I will never complain about a woman taking too long in the bathroom again," he said quietly as he headed up the stairs toward his room. Wardrobe was beginning to become a problem for James. Dejectedly, he tried pair after pair of his pants, noting how each of them reached the same point on his legs before they became uncomfortably tight. They were not too long, since he hadn't lost a centimeter of his height, but the crushing sensation about his hips made the garments virtually unwearable. Admitting defeat, he retrieved the pair of sweatpants that he had worn the previous day from his hamper and tugged them on. It was a bit warm for them, but it was better to have clothing that fit after all. Shirts were much easier to work with. If anything, all of the items in his collection seemed to hang slightly loose on his shoulders. Going with a casual look, he selected a white t-shirt featuring an image of Bloom County characters shouting, "Ahead warp Cillian." It seemed appropriate. After finishing his wardrobe, he again pulled his hair back into a ponytail, still slightly amazed at the length it had reached. Trying to hide a bit of it, he pulled on his leather jacket with the ponytail underneath. It restrained his head movement only slightly and concealed the bulk of his hair. "You're not going out like that." The only response from his mother upon seeing his clothing selections when he entered the main room. "I want to be comfortable," James replied, trying to appeal to and sense of fairness. It fell short. "I am not going to take you to the hairdresser looking like that," and ordered, pointing toward his room. "You go up there right now and change into something that you haven't worn recently. Nothing fits." James tried the half-truth, hoping it would work. "Fine, I'll get you some pants," and replied, striding toward her room. After a few moments, she returned and handed James a pair of slacks. "Try these." These are yours, Mom." James was about to continue his objection when he noticed the angry look in his mother's eyes. Meekly, he ascended the stairs. Once in his room, James discarded the sweatpants and slid the tan slacks over his legs. The feeling was different as the garment easily slipped over his hips. The button was not what he was used to, fastening from the opposite side. Unlike his own pants, there were feelings of tightness in several areas. The crotch was slightly uncomfortable as it pressed against him awkwardly. Apart from that, the pants rode his hips rather than his waist. They weren't tight, but the length of the leg was a little short. James selected a different shirt as well, this one a light gray polo. It was loose, like the t-shirt had been, so he didn't even bother removing the t-shirt, wearing it like an undershirt. This time, when he descended the stairs, his mother looked him up and down with an appraising eye. She nodded softly before observing his jacket with disdain. "Do you have to wear that?" she asked, gesturing at the garment. It didn't really match with the rest of the outfit and gave his shape a blockier outline. "Come on, Mom, I changed the pants and the shirt." James groaned, expecting that he would be forced to make another assent. "All right, fine. But we're getting you a new jacket before you go off to Moscow." And sharp look had changed to one of slight amusement. James exited the house after his mother. They entered the aged station wagon and left the driveway. "So, have you thought about what kind of haircut you want?" Anne asked, looking at the ponytail that James wore. "Short." "Oh, a page boy or something like that?" "Shorter." "Maggie, I am not going to have you getting a boy's haircut." "Mom, it's just going to grow out again." James groaned at the sound of his new name. He desperately did not want to respond to it, but there was no denying the inevitable. "So, you want to look nice, don't you?" Anne asked, turning the car onto a side street. I suppose. We'll compromise. Shoulder length." "Okay." Anne's offer was at least a step in the right direction. If worst came to worst, he could always just shave his head at home. "All right." James finished, looking at the parking lot where they had stopped. This wasn't the usual place that he had come to get his haircut as a young man. Usually, he had just forked over $10 to the mall store and let them at his head with a set of clippers. The shop in front of where the car sat was a full-fledged beauty parlor. And removed the keys from the ignition and undid her seatbelt, sliding out of the car. She shut the door and waited patiently for James. James, for his part, took a deep breath, whispered non carborundum illegitime, and stepped out on his side. He allowed his mother to lead the way into the foreign territory. "Hi, Anne. Haven't seen you in a while." A thin, red-haired woman looked up from the head of hair she was working on as they entered. "This must be Maggie." The woman's arm came up in a greeting, and the woman exchanged pleasantries, going over numerous topics as the red-haired woman clipped away at her customer. James reflected that hair that bright red had to be from a bottle. In fact, the proprietor looked as if she was her own best customer, since he was easily able to count 6 earrings in her right ear alone. "Okay, Betty, what do you think?" The woman addressed her customer again, holding a small mirror up. Betty was obviously pleased with her haircut, gushing out several compliments before laboriously printing out a check. After a few more pleasantries, the red-haired woman was paid, and Betty practically skipped out, primping slightly as she left. "So, what brings you here today, Maggie?" The woman addressed him, and merely nodded at James, waiting for him to speak. "I, wanted to get a haircut?" James offered. "Well, that's why I'm here." The woman smiled again, cleaning up clumps of hair from the floor with a small dustpan and broom. "What do we have to work with?" Shrugging off his jacket, James pulled his ponytail around his shoulder to show the full length of his hair. The woman's eyes brightened as she saw it, and a broad smile crossed her face. "Wow, that looks nice already. What were you thinking? A little color maybe? Lightning? Here, have a seat." She gestured toward another chair, in front of a basin with a shower nozzle attached. "She wants to lose some length, Denise," and offered from her seat. James noticed that she had picked up a copy of People and was reading it intently. "But it's so nice." Denise sighed as James leaned back in the chair. Denise's hands quickly came around the back of his head, removing the rubber band with a deft move and spilling the blonde tangles into the basin. "You don't really want to lose all that much, do you?" "It's a bit of a pain, really." James watched as Denise quickly adjusted the water temperature and tested it against the back of her hand. Shrugging, she began to run the shower head through his hair, soaking every strand fully. "Let me guess. Boyfriend doesn't like it," Denise said, staring into James's face as she worked. She reached for something out of sight, and then James felt her hands again, scrubbing at the hair she had just soaked. "It's not that, really," James tried quietly. Didn't she realize he was a guy? Wasn't the lack of certain features a big enough giveaway? "Sawyer, it isn't." Denise smirked as she rinsed his hair again with the nozzle. "High school guys can be such a pain." "Actually, Maggie's going to college this fall." Anne's voice sounded a little far off, since the basin where his head lay blocked a bit of the sound. "Oh, fun. What's your major?" Denise asked, reaching for some other substance. He felt her hands again on his scalp, rubbing something else into his hair. "I'm not sure yet," James answered, trying to stay nonchalant. What the hell were they, girlfriends? He half wanted to tell her to take her questions and shove them up her ass. However, the presence of his mother kept that thought strictly in his own mind. Denise's strong hands began to twist his hair, squeezing the remnants of water from the strands. The scent of the various products was pleasant. James was momentarily stunned by how nice everything smelled in here. He had never noticed it before. "Okay, up." Denise lifted James' hair out of the basin and let it hang loose. She gestured toward the chair that had been occupied only a few minutes before. "Have a seat." He did so. With a smile, Denise fastened a small piece of gauze about his neck before pulling a large plastic sheet up. It covered his body, wrapping about his neck. He stared at the face in the mirror, with the long hair streaming straight down from his scalp. "So, how much are we losing?" "Here." Denise marked a small point about 6 inches from the tips of his hair. "A lot more," James replied, watching her hand rise slowly. "More. More. More." Denise's hand was about even with the bottom of his shoulder blades at this point. "Keep going." "He's not worth it, Maggie," Denise stated, a look of concern crossing her face. "Why don't you think about this for a while?" "Keep going." "Shoulder length," James insisted, his eyes flashing up to meet hers in the mirror. "Anne, talk to her. Is she absolutely sure she wants to throw this much work away?" Denise called over her shoulder to James' mother, who was watching intently. "Are you sure about this, Maggie?" Anne asked, a smile on her face. "Yes. Can you please just cut my hair?" James addressed the comment to both his mother and Denise. What was it? This wasn't a major emotional trauma. He was just getting his hair cut, for crying out loud. "Okay," Denise said after a moment, picking up a small pair of shears. "Seems like such a waste, though." With that final comment, she began to make small snips. James watched impassively as the hair began to fall away. Denise worked quickly, talking all the while to Anne, and him as well. Her topics ran the gamut, from discussions of her boyfriend to how her job was going, to "Did you hear about what Jenny Richards did at Doc Ricketts last night?" James tried to stumble through, but the vast majority of the references eluded him. His mother had no such problem, discussing each topic as if it was the solution to world hunger. Slowly but surely, the final shape of James' hair took form. Denise had chosen a point at his shoulders to make the final cut. She left most of the rest of the hair static, parting it in the middle. She then blow-dried the strands and finished it with a slight amount of mousse. Looking at himself in the mirror, James realized that she had given him the Rachel. "Ugh, I loathe the Rachel." James groaned. "Could we try parting it on the left?" "The what, babe?" Denise asked, a look of confusion on her face. James realized that Friends hadn't gotten extremely popular yet. Denise probably thought she was being original. "Never mind, but I don't like my hair parted in the middle." He tried again. "That's easy," Denise responded, quickly flipping the part in his hair toward the right with a deft motion of her comb. "How's that?" "Better," James replied. Actually, it was pretty darn good. The cut framed his face perfectly, showing off his forehead and accentuating his eyes. "It looks great," Anne crowed, coming up behind Denise and James. "Maggie, I think it's wonderful." "Thanks, Mo." "Anne." James stuttered over the word, realizing that she had probably not told Denise that he was her daughter.